Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1. We are excited for another potential great Formula One race. Man, we've had a nice run since the French Grand Prix. This is John Massengill sitting in the studio with Les Kaiser. How's it going, Les?
Good morning. Let's do this.
Jonathan Green is not going to join us this morning. He is up doing some Trans Am racing.
What do we pay him for?
That's right. We're going to have to
That's
dock
right.
his
That
paycheck.
is what we pay for. Yeah.
So, yeah, we are excited. We're about an hour and 10 minutes from the Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix. And I really am excited because, we've had two great races out of, we've had some fantastic racing and maybe the best race in a long time with the German Grand Prix. And then yesterday in qualifying, Max Verstappen is sitting on pole and promising us another potentially great race because that Red Bull car is fast.
Oh, it definitely is. And, if you missed the post-qual conference, he's feeling really good. And Lewis is not.
Yeah, yep.
Lewis just didn't feel like he had everything he should have had. And Red Bull is up in the front.
I know. We were talking about this last couple of races, how Red Bull, Verstappen has just been looking faster and faster, but Red Bull, the car it's obviously doing great. The power must be up because, that's always been the last couple of years that Red Bull has been great in the corners, depending on where they were in Monaco and others that they just did fantastic. But the fact that Verstappen's doing this well, that car is fast.
It is very fast. He's feeling good about it, but it was interesting because mentioning up on power, horsepower was one of the topics of the conference, and it's always funny when they get asked that and they purposely dance around answering anything. And the outcome of yesterday's conference was basically nobody knows what kind of power we make.
Yeah, well, yeah,
sure. Sure they do. No, they don't use a dyno.
Yeah.
My gosh, every 7-Eleven in Austin has a dyno, I think.
Well,
yeah,
and who knows? It's probably one of the most closely guarded secrets that the drivers may not know it, but anyway, the bottom line is that car is fast, and this could be a fantastic race. The Hungary Grand Prix is kind of known for difficult passing. So with Verstappen up front, you would think that if he can have a great start, then he could win this race. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't really love pole to pole, but if that happens today, I won't be disappointed because it's not Mercedes.
True, and that'll be good. Max is Max. Things can get wild. I'm excited for that, and we'll see what they actually wind up doing with that. Can Max keep his head together and race pole to pole? Or will there something come up? There's a long run to turn one. And so dive bombing will come into play, I'm for sure, especially with people, once they get moving. Mercedes is good off the line. Everybody, watches what they do. Unless it's a clear drop, Mercedes is often really good off the line. So I'm going to watch for Bottas and Hamilton to pounce.
Well, let's think about what Verstappen has done the last few races. He's been, it's funny. This is his first pole in his career, 93 races, and he's never had pole. Which is, on one hand, you think, well, that's a lot of races to be in a pretty good car to not get pole. But then on the other hand, if you look, he's the fourth youngest ever to get pole. That's how long Verstappen's been racing, and he's only 21 years old. That's actually a really cool stat, both of those combined. But what I was leading up to is Verstappen has started its second in two of the last three races, but he has dropped back after that because he didn't start well. Remember, one of those races he had horrible tire spin, and he dropped back multiple positions. And if he does that today, that's not a good thing at this circuit.
Yeah, they were talking of clutch prep yesterday in the post-qual race. Everybody felt good about it. In fact, they got into joking mode, and Max said he actually popped a wheelie in the car and carried it all the way through first into second. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Max.
and he doesn't have, this is a whole other story. We're going to talk a lot about this, but he doesn't have his teammate sitting up there with him to give him some protection. Because Gasly has just he has not looked good, man. You were ready to dump Gasly,
I was.
about the fourth race of the season, but he has not looked good. He's
How
not
do you feel about
fast.
him now?
You know, there was a point there when he was looking a little better the last few
You
races.
didn't answer my question.
Well, I think it's obvious he is not doing well. I mean, he's what, half a second, something like that, behind Verstappen. So
right.
well,
Is he dump worthy? Yeah. What are you thinking?
I think you have to.
I
I think if he continues to do this poorly, then you have to. You have to, because you can't have. I mean, okay, let's just assume that Max Verstappen is a phenomenal talent, right? The next, the next Hamilton, the next best of his generation, and even that though. But compare he and Bottas. Would you say that Bottas is close to the best of his generation? I probably wouldn't say that. And look how close he stays to Hamilton in the same car. But Gasly in the same car as Verstappen is not even close. So I have to, there's my argument. So yes,
okay,
you're right.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let's turn to somebody else in the paddock. Mr. Stroll, your son is back in 19th on the grid currently. What's he going to be doing the rest of the season?
Okay. It's a little argument because his teammates in 17th. But
yeah. But here's the stickier one, and I like it because this guy's a good one. George Russell, 16. Boom. Up ahead of a few drivers that are not often behind a Williams car.
Yeah, that's
Ricardo,
one of the great stories.
Sergio. Well, and Daniel Ricciardo did not have a good run in quali, but he's also swapped out an engine, so he's starting at the back of the grid. But Kubica in Williams is making sure there's somebody in last place. Racing Point with the Lance is next to him. Well, I think Lance. Can you imagine what the dinner table is like around there, son? Yeah, well, Dad, you gave me a crap car, and you bought a crappy team, and I just can't imagine that. At this point, with those people's steering matters, I think it's a point fest at any table that they get together about. Is it driver? Is it car? Is it Claire Williams? Ooh,
yeah,
I can just see this pointing at each other.
Well, that's one of the better stories this weekend is the upgrades that Williams has brought to the car has made them competitive. I mean, you look at where Russell's times were, and they used to be 2 seconds behind the last car. I mean, it was not even close.
Well, George Russell was doing some cool stuff, and he, if you remember back in Monaco, Hamilton was using the sausage curb to tip his car a little bit into the turn, give it a little shove in a manner to set him up into the curb. It appeared that George Russell was using that berm, that sausage curb, a little bit to help him aid into the next curve respond.
Yeah, it looked like he was just getting additional circuit, additional track to use on that curb. I don't know if he was using it in any other way, but I saw what you're talking about.
It's interesting because, the general approach is stay away from those, don't touch them, they'll screw you up, they'll break your floors, things like that. But those two drivers have obviously shown that they can use them in a different manner and succeed.
Well, let's run down qualifying. So obviously Max Verstappen on pole, and then behind Max, right behind Max, actually, it was a very tight window, 18 1,000ths. Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes, and then Lewis Hamilton not far behind Bottas in the Mercedes, which we'll come back to all these stories. There's a ton of them. And then Charles Leclerc and then Sebastian Vettel, both those guys, was it about a half second back? No, it's about 2.5 tenths back. But Leclerc and Vettel, once again, Leclerc faster than Vettel just slightly. And then Pierre Gasly, like we talked about, he's down in 6th. Lando Norris in 7th. Carlos Sainz in 8th. And then Grosjean in the in the Australia spec Haas Ferrari in 9th. I mean, that's That's such a crazy story. We'll talk a lot about that today too. Kimi Räikkönen in 10th, Nico Hulkenberg in 11th, Alexander Albon in 12th, Kvyat, who had a great race on the podium last weekend. We'll talk more about the German Grand Prix. Antonio Giovinazzi in 14th. He'll be starting lower. I think he had an engine swap or something. We'll talk about that. Kevin Magnussen in 15th. Man, Magnussen's car all over the board yesterday. George Russell 16, Perez 17, Ricciardo 18, and Stroll and Kubica. But you realize there were so many great stories all the way down the grid. I was having trouble getting down it because there's so many. So we talked about Max and his first pole ever, but Bottas starting second. There's been discussions, there's been rumors anyway, silly season rumors, of Mercedes dropping Bottas. And the last couple of races, he had the crash last week in the rain. But before that, he's starting to look good, and then he qualifies faster than Mercedes. Than Hamilton in the Mercedes this week.
I don't know that Bottas really needs to feel threatened. I think what he needs is consistency. He's been good. He's still there. The car is excellent. He is excellent. Look at the rest of the field. Everybody's bouncing all over the place. Max is responding. Red Bull's coming up. They're looking good. But as far as front runners up in the front pack, I don't think Bottas should feel threatened.
I agree. I do. And it really kind of goes to what I just said, how his times are pretty close to Hamilton every week. It's not like he's sitting back there half a second behind Hamilton every week. So I agree with that. Let's see. So, let's talk about Hamilton. He was sick last weekend. He didn't do well last weekend, and
you're right. And it was apparently pretty obvious because he said he pretty much spent this week being pretty stationary in bed, just recovering because and so that tells me, okay, this probably was serious because Hamilton's always out hitting the entertainment scenes and running around gallivanting all over the world in his red jet. But for him to stay chill for a solid week, that's very unlike him.
Well, we'll see today. He looked fast over the weekend. Both Mercedes cars did. But so he's starting in third today, and he and his teammates sitting there. So right behind them is Leclerc and Vettel. So in Q1, Leclerc, if you recall, spun and hit the wall with the back of his car. And he, when you first saw it in the in-car camera, it looked kind of like he just kind of, grazed it, didn't really hit it. But when you saw it later, it looked like it hit the wall really good. And he had to come in for a wing and was able to get back out in Q2. But I think the commentators on television also said it. I wondered if he had damaged the car enough, but he and Vettel are essentially the same times, just slightly ahead. So, but the fact that he's still making those mistakes, he's still young, and he's incredibly fast most of the time, but he's still making a couple of mistakes.
Definitely, for sure. He will continue to grow, and I honestly think that he's rattled Sebastian.
Yeah.
I really do. Sebastian is, he doesn't seem to be as confident as he was, and now he's got this young kid that's, quite honestly out qualifying him and out driving him quite often so far through this season.
Yeah. Well, in Q1 yesterday, so we had Leclerc spin. It's funny, Grosjean at that point barely made it into Q2. That was actually strategic, I think. It was when he was doing his lap. Ricciardo and Perez, did you see that clash in Q1? And it really wasn't a direct clash with those guys. It sort of ended up that way, but it was really, they got stuck in traffic. And of course, Ricciardo did not make it out of Q1. And so That's why he's subsequently qualifying at, 16th. So
folks, if you missed that part, there's a bit of track etiquette that goes on. Think of, if you're one of the track day guys, driver etiquette is I'll point you by when it's safe and I'm clear and you go by. Well, think of a rule like that as you're coming into the last flying laps of qualifying. People kind of do start queuing up as they're headed toward the starting line last time. Well, they wound up behind some of the lapped traffic or the slower traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just about to start their flying lap. Perez is up front, or just in front of Ricardo. Ricardo gets anxious, and he steps outside the queuing line that was headed towards the start-finish line. Winds up, somewhat interfering with Perez, and that's what Perez got upset about. Is he messed up? He didn't stay in his place, as is the normal protocol, as the gentleman's agreement, whatever you want to call it, honor among thieves. You stay in line, and so anyway, Ricardo broke trail and went on his own,
Yep.
and Perez feels that screwed him up.
Yep. Well,
Though it's not, it's within the bounds of the rules.
Yeah.
But not etiquette.
Well, and I said 16th. He actually qualified 18th. Ricardo did because of that. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and take a first break. And when we come back, we're going to actually do a little recap of the German Grand Prix because it was such a fantastic race that we jumped right into it last week, but I want to talk a little more about it. You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM. Back after these messages. Thank you, Roman Grosjean, for welcoming us back. I think that was at the Austin Grand Prix last year is where we recorded that. I hope he has a good day today. Was he starting ninth, if I'm not mistaken, and in that older spec car? But hey, we got some people that are watching us live on Facebook and Twitter. Unless you said somebody had a question on Facebook.
Yeah, Jess Franco responded. I made the comment about, is Vettel rattled by Leclerc? And he goes, well, was Ricardo rattled by Verstappen at Red Bull Racing? I think he was not only rattled, I think he had good reason to be threatened, as Vettel does too. But I think at that point, the way they were performing when they started making car decisions for the year, I think they more wanted to take care of Max than Ricardo, is my perception of that environment.
I think that's, when I hear the word rattled and I think of the way Vettel is reacting, I think that is more appropriate. But I think Ricardo, I don't think he was necessarily rattled, but I think he did. I mean, he obviously saw the writing on the wall, and but I don't think he got rattled, because I didn't see him making a bunch of mistakes like Vettel has made. But I think that he was definitely intimidated by Verstappen, but I don't know
Sure.
about rattled.
I don't know. I'm gonna agree with Franco here. I think it all kind of snowballed, and I think he was rattled.
Well, when you talk about rattled, last week at the German Grand Prix, when Vettel started 20th and ended up finishing second, which was pretty amazing. I said to you during the race, I said when Vettel was coming up through and he was probably about third or fourth,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, you know what? I said he's going to make a mistake. I said Vettel's going to make a mistake, and he's going to, or I think maybe, and he was already up to second, and he was going to make a mistake trying to catch Max, but he didn't, and finished the race in second and had really a fantastic race.
Okay, but what gave you so much confidence to say he was going to make a
Because
mistake?
he'd made so many before. That's why, he's made so many in the last 2 years. This season and last season, he's made so many mistakes, and mistakes that feel like that he's rattled. That's why I just don't see Ricardo the same way. But that's why I thought that he was going to make a mistake, because I feel like he makes those mistakes when he's under pressure.
Okay, all righty.
All right, well, let's talk a little
What
bit
else can we argue about?
I definitely want to talk more about the German Grand Prix, but a little bit more of qualifying from yesterday, because I was rooting for Kvyat after last weekend, but he did not have a great qualifying. But
I think it was more in typical Kvyat form.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, once in a while the blind squirrel gets a nut or whatever it is. I'm afraid that was Kvyat's situation last week.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously must have had a pretty good drive, but yeah, I'd say the rain and the situation absolutely help.
And I say that, and if I was the blind squirrel, I would have
Starved.
starved by now.
I was looking at Magnussen. I wrote some notes down yesterday in qualifying for Magnussen. So he after the race talked about his car having such a little narrow window of performance, right?
Yep.
And he finished at the bottom of Q2, 7/10 behind Grosjean. I mean, obviously they're not the same car, because they've very publicly said they've got two different cars, because they're trying to figure out what went wrong as they upgraded the car along the season, right? What went wrong? But he reported back that there was a big gust of wind. They talked about the wind there and how at certain spots on the circuit that it can affect them. But he said a big gust of wind took him offline. But think about the stability of the car and its ability to deal with a gust of wind like that. So if it's got that tight window, but man, 7/10 off of Grosjean. So that was a huge, that's just a massive story, really. So I'll move it on to Q3 in my notes here. And we talked about Max's 93 Grand Prix before he gets a pole, and his pace leading up to his final lap. I actually tweeted it out. I said, is Max going to take pole? Because before he had that lap, he had a couple of sectors that were way purple, like way faster than anybody.
Right.
And so you could see it coming, and you thought if he can put this all together, and sure enough, he did. And there's some really interesting stats about Max's pole. Not only is it Max's 93rd before he did it, it was the 100th different driver, and also he was the fourth youngest to ever do it. But also it was Red Bull's only their third pole in the hybrid era, and all the previous ones were by Ricardo, by the way. And then, and get this was Honda's first since Australia of 2006. How about that for a stat?
Gosh, that's a different sport.
Yeah, but think about this now. Think about where Honda has come. Jonathan's not on the show this morning, but he's been saying it all along. He said when Honda came back, they're not going to sit back there and not have a great engine. They are going to do it right, whatever it takes. He talked about it's a Japanese culture thing where they are not going to settle for this engine not being right. Yeah. But look at where they are right now. So the engine's obviously fixed and fast with Verstappen on pole, And the other Red Bull car, Gasly, has looked fast at times. The Toro Rossos look fast. I mean, if you look at the stats right now, just even the standings, that Honda engine has turned around, and Christian Horner and Red Bull look like geniuses right now with what they've done. I mean, because if you look at what's happening right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Verstappen gives Mercedes and Ferrari a run for the race from here on out, because he's building up to it. This just didn't just happen. The last 2 or 3 races, well, obviously he won last week. I know it was in the rain, but still leading up to that, really ever since the French Grand Prix, that Honda has looked really powerful, and the Red Bull car has got it all working out. So, I mean, this is really exciting. If you'd said this, a few races back, that we could be having true battles between Verstappen and the Mercedes and the Ferrari, I think everybody would have been ecstatic.
Yeah. Yes, we would have been ecstatic, but it's not consistent enough. It is not yet consistent enough. But yes, I believe Honda's coming around. There's a lot of things going on. Is it the budget of Red Bull working with Honda that is making Honda have the difference?
Good question. I don't know.
Could be the engineering knowledge that Red Bull has within their own, also working with Honda.
Yeah.
To me, that's a big part of it, is not just putting a good bullet in the car. It's having the engineering to know how to work with it and make the two work together.
All right. Well, we haven't gotten out the phone number yet. Let's see who else wants to throw in their opinion on this. The number 512-643-LIVE. Write that down, because we want you to call after the race, especially. We want to get your opinion. 512-643-5483. Give us a call and tell us your thoughts on that. But yeah, you know what Red Bull needs more than just a great engine and a great driver like Max Verstappen. They also they got the wings, but they need Gasly to step up, like we talked about earlier, because it is easier if your teammates are up there with you. So
now I wonder, one of the things that used to go on more so, does Max and Gasly work well together on track? Where we see some pairing up, we see some teamwork just happening amongst Formula One. I mean, amongst Mercedes, but I don't feel like Red Bull's been close enough to be teammates and work as teammates when they're out on course.
Yeah, I want to see if they were closer to the same speed, if they were lapping closer together, I might, it'd be a little easier to judge that. But yeah.
But I think two cars run faster than one, as we've seen in many of them. And if they work together, they might both progress up there together. Yes, certainly running the defensive line for each other, things of that nature. That's what's got to be worked with, and I don't think they do it. They're out for themselves individually when they're on course, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story right now because of the way that we're getting a competitive. It really could be, today is a great example. It could be any one of the three. It could be Max and the Red Bull, or either the Mercedes, or potentially a Ferrari. It's funny how, when you start to say it out loud, Ferrari just did not look fast this weekend, and it would probably be a pretty big surprise if Ferrari won this. Not a huge surprise, but it would be a little bit of a big surprise. I want to read this quote. In fact, we have a couple of clips. Maybe we'll play a clip here because we got our clips ready? Yeah, we got our clips ready. So let's start with Max Verstappen, because this was a big day for him. So let's hear from Max.
It was really good. The car, straight away when I went out in qualifying, I mean, the whole weekend it was good, but in qualifying it was really hooked up. And of course, that's where you like it to be in qualifying, to be hooked up. But yeah, laps were good. And of course, then to come away with pole position, my first one as well, was very nice.
You got 2 Mercedes and 2 Ferrari in your rearview mirror, though. How much hard work's tomorrow going to be?
Just need to make sure I have a good start. And then from there onwards, we'll see what happens. Even if I don't have a good start, I mean, I won races this year with a bad start, so I'm not too worried. And the whole weekend it was fine. Felt good in the car, felt good with the starts, but of course tomorrow is again another day. The grip levels can be a bit different, but yeah, I'm not too worried.
And by the way, that was from Formula One's YouTube. But one thing we haven't talked about today is the first thing I did when I got in the studio this morning, check the weather. It doesn't look like the weather is going to be a factor today, but
Well, not there. It's raining in Austin.
yeah, first time in a while, actually.
I'm not complaining. I don't think any of our greenery is.
Yeah, so Verstappen, he talked about that's one thing that made me think of the rain. Is he talked about you never know the tracks can be a little different because it was cloudy and it looks to be sunnier today. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, he said the car felt good all weekend, and obviously it showed because he looked fast all weekend long. All right, you know what? It's time for another quick break. Let's go ahead and go to break, and when we come back, we will be, let's see how far we are from the race now. We are about 40 minutes from the start of the Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix. You can hear it right here on SiriusXM. You're listening to Speed City. We're live from Austin, Texas. Back after these messages.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
All right, thanks everybody for interacting with us on social media. We're going to talk about a couple of your questions. If you want to call in, the number's 512-643-5483. And I was thinking, Andy P just tweeted at us, and I was thinking what he said when you were talking about the engineering prowess of Red Bull. And that is, he said, loving the Honda discussion, but there are two words that set Red Bull apart. Adrian Newey.
And that's one great mind there.
He says definitely an improving engine, but superior aero. And that's what I was saying before. They've had fantastic aero, but I think the difference it feels like is that engine. But you had somebody commenting on Facebook.
Yeah, somebody else commented, said, Gasly doesn't perform well enough. Would Red Bull Racing move Albon up from Toro Rosso? Oh, I think that's absolutely a possibility. That is one of those things that anytime you got a farm league around, you're watching the players there, and I think Albon is a great candidate. He's well liked, he's well spoken. He doesn't have any of the he doesn't really get into the off track drama that we see some of the other farm league teams dealing with the drivers.
Yes, I agree with that. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the German Grand Prix because I know we've got about a half hour until Hungary here starts, but I really think. Let me ask you. I mean, I saw some discussions on social media this week. Some people out there love to throw out the polls like, was this the best race in recent history? And what was it, 2011 Canada? There was a few others that were thrown out
Sure.
there, but in fact, before you answer that, I'm just going to run down some of the things that really made this really a pretty amazing day because, yes, the show, the rain, we had 7 cars that did not finish. We had how many different pit stops? There were probably 5 pit stops on average. I think the least number of pit stops was 3. The most was 6. We had huge number of pit stops, which obviously introduces a ton of entertainment. So the overall show was crazy amazing. And then you had Mercedes' epic fail on their big day, right? They were celebrating
Toto jinxed it all the way around. He said he's done everything he can to sabotage this. We've got Mercedes on the name of the race. We've got changed liveries. We've got historic pictures on the walls of the garage. Some of the crew members are wearing vintage designed outfits.
Most of them were.
We've pretty much done everything we can to sabotage ourselves this weekend, is what he said before the race.
Yeah, those outfits.
And he delivered.
Yeah, it was a huge fail for Mercedes, and Bottas not finishing and Hamilton finishing after all the penalties 11th?
Behind Williams.
Yeah. There you go. I think that says it all. I know Williams had some improvements last week, but yeah. So, yeah, and you had a fantastic show. You had Mercedes' epic fail. Of course, you had Max Verstappen's win, right? So that's crazy great that we didn't have a Mercedes.
Some weather.
Win. Yeah, and on top of all the weather. And then, of course, Daniel Kvyat finishing on the podium a few hours after having his first child. So that's pretty cool. And then what we talked about with Vettel, vindicated after having mistake after mistake. And I just wonder how many people were thinking the same thing I was as Vettel was coming up, getting closer and closer, that he was going to make a big mistake, but he didn't. So just those are the first things that I wrote down in my notes, thinking those are the big things that happened. But so back to the question, what do you think about, was it the best race of the year? Was it the best race of the hybrid era? What?
I'm gonna say, yeah, it was the best one of the year because all of those things came into play. The tires, to keep up with the ever-changing weather, really was a part of the game, part of the strategy. Yes, we always have them, but when you've got the weather, you've got to run your second thing. Well, that comes into play. You run it an intermediate or a full as your second tire, so that comes in. But as you said, the 3 pit stops. I mean, 3 to 5. I think there was even one person at 7. That as far as number of pit stops, that alone changed that race. And quite honestly, I think if we implemented some changes, that would change the sport. I mentioned a little bit this week, what if things were taken back in such a way that these tires, might only last 10 or 15 laps? That's going to force you into at least 3 stops for, probably for many.
Yeah.
I think the pit stops then become really critical, really are something that has to be followed and acknowledged.
I don't know if I like the tire situation. I don't know. My instincts is I don't want that change. I don't know what I really want besides sprinklers, but I know, I know that's been joked about, but it's also been talked about seriously. But I don't know. I don't know why I don't like the making the tire life. All of it is some sort of artificial thing, right? All of it.
Well, I'm not going to Bernie Ecclestone's, water cannon spraying the track. But I do think a tire strategy is something we've already accepted. It is part of the race. Okay, well, let's reel it in a little bit, reduce the life of it, and let's make it more of a thing. Last week, last week we were speaking to Price Cobb about some of the things, and one of the things that he and I agree on is real-time data communications to the driver from the team. You've got your panel of engineers watching the data, deciding what to do, and the driver is sitting there doing whatever doing whatever buttons and modes that they say. And
Did you say buns?
That could be. And so the buttons, that's where I was headed. The driver's told to make these adjustments because of something an engineer sitting in a sterile environment with his buddies looking at all this data feed. I'm not wild about that.
I see where you're going with that. Yep. Like
I'd rather see, after the race, get together. Hey, we watched this. This is going on. Remember how that felt? Well, the next time you need to go to, Seb, mode 2-1.
Yep. And I'd going back to, I'm looking at all the scribbles that I've got in my German Grand Prix notes. I mean, you had mistakes, overtaking, strategies that didn't work. You had crashes and somebody on the podium you would have never counted on. And really, top 10, if you'd have predicted that top 10 in Vegas, you'd have been called a time traveler because no one ever could have predicted that. And what do we have? I think I had this right. Points featuring 8 different teams. So, man, that really, you said best race of the season. I don't know how you don't go back further than that, because maybe this. How about one of the top 5 races of the last 10 years? I think that's probably a pretty safe bet. I think most people wouldn't argue with that. But then you stack that on top of Silverstone and Austria. After the French Grand Prix, everyone was just like, oh my, this is Formula One is, you couldn't get on social without somebody saying Formula One is totally ridiculous. It's boring. It's horrible. And then it's just completely turned around. We've been treated to some fantastic racing. And let's not forget, think about the circuit. Paul Ricard, it's a test circuit.
Right.
So, you don't really expect to have the best racing at a test circuit. And so, but since then, it has been, fantastic. We have been so excited to come on for the post-race show. After France, we talked about the race for 5 minutes, and what else is there to talk about? There wasn't much.
The weather.
The weather. But,
hey, so looking forward, things that would impact the future of Formula One on track. Absolutely. I think the tire lifespan needs to be shortened even further. I think more pit stops made it. I don't know, maybe we're talking more than 2 compounds. To me, let's just put 3 compounds on the tire menu, and that's what you get, and run with it, plus an intermediate and a full. And then the other, aerodynamics. This is one that we keep pushing up. Why aren't cars up behind each other? Well, because the dirty air coming off those wings. And, why are they going so fast? Well, because they're making dirty air because of those big wings. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There's got to be some medium to pull back on that wing size, which is generating dirty air, which is preventing somebody to getting up in your draft and really zipping around you as often. I want to go see what'll happen. I want them just to do it. Enough talk about, will we? Maybe, I don't know. Let's reduce the wing size.
Okay.
And go with the tunnel for aerodynamics and for downforce, or actually ground effects, if you will, creating the downforce. I'd rather see that. The air behind the car from the ground effects is a cleaner air than off the wings. And just to make sure, if you're not familiar with that term, the dirty air is, imagine swirling air. You walk downtown between the buildings and you suddenly get a breeze.
That's a good example.
A whiff of wind from one direction, and a couple more steps, it's the opposite direction, and all those kind of things. In racing, they call that dirty air. Whereas if you walked through a canyon with solid walls, the wind was always coming from the same direction, whether it's in front of you or behind you. And that's the idea of the ground effects, is having a consistent air that you can predict and know that's coming off that car in front of you, that you can confidently get up behind it
And get ready to
draft
pass.
up, build your momentum, make that dive bomb pass to the inside or outside, whichever you want to go, carry on and pass and go around the outside for all we care. But it makes that win much more predictable for you approaching the back end of that car.
Yep. And I think that's what has been the big discussions. I found an article that I'd bookmarked and saved it. It was an article on Formula1.com that talks about the 2021 rules. And it's funny, there's a lot of the things we've been talking about, like a further reduction of electronics and driver aids, and what to do with, here's the one you and Price were talking about, what to do with the car-to-pit telemetry, including the notion of whether drivers should be left more on their own, exactly what you were talking about. Investigating whether to introduce further standard components for cost reduction, such as drive shafts, steering columns. That's actually, I like that idea because it's not like a crucial aerodynamic or engine part.
Mm-hmm.
And simplification of lower parts of the chassis, an area which is prone to damage from the curbs. So why not make some of those more simple and cheaper? And here's an interesting one I don't think we've ever talked about, and we've had a lot of discussion about this in the last several months, and the possibility to further reduce team personnel at race weekends for cost reduction. So, it is expensive to haul people around and put them up in hotels and all that. So, and what about this one? And this one I don't think we've talked about, at least not much, the race weekend format. They're just saying broaden the discussion. That's, they're throwing it out there, not making any suggestion there. But the race weekend format, I know there's been some discussion about different types of qualifying and maybe even points or whatever from qualifying and other things. But
how would you change qualifying?
That's a good question. Let me think. I actually like the format, the way they do it now. I do like it, where you've got, because there is pressure. A great example of why I like it is like Grosjean, how.
And are you speaking about the knockout process?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like when they put Grosjean out, when they did, they were saying, okay, the track is getting better and better. Everybody's, but is it this the right time? They were right on the verge of saying, the commentators were, and I'm certain the engineers were saying the same thing. Is it time to put Grosjean out? Well, they look like geniuses because he finished right at the bottom and went out at just the right time. So I do like the format right now. But would you add some points for pole maybe?
Let me start earlier in the process. For quali, I would like to see us go to something similar to 3-lap average is your qualifying lap time. No more of this happy hour, one lap wonder
that's a good
laps.
Thought. That's a good thought.
No more of party time mode kind of thing. I'd like to see it legitimately be closer to what we're going to see in race time than 1 lap wonders.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
although part of me does like the fact that think about if you had a car, you'd say, I want to see what's the fastest this thing can do on the track. I'm going to turn up every knob. I'm going to pull out all the stops. I do like that aspect of playing around with it. I think from a real racing standpoint, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But I do like the idea that, wow, let's see what this car can really do. And here we have the best cars on the planet with the best tech on the planet, the best aero, the best engines, the best everything. I do like to see that and just see how fast you can get around it. It's kind of like when, you remember when who was it? Was it Toyota or Audi? I think it was Toyota. I can't remember. It was Toyota or Audi. Took that WEC car, took that hybrid, and did that to it. And they took it to Spa, and they broke Hamilton's lap record with that.
Right.
Same kind of thought process going on with that.
The way you said Toyota, I thought you were hearkening back to a famous cowboy coach, Tom Landry's.
Your Texas
Toyota
roots
commercial.
are coming out.
There you go. Hey, so okay, qualifying, we could change it up. I think having a couple of laps would be a big improvement. But what else are you going to do besides that? Yes, I think possibly let's draw in some points without changing anything about where you wind up in qualifying right now. How about drawing in some points for the fastest average of the 3 or 5 laps of your qualifying
I think
session?
those are reasonable arguments. I do. I think it's worth talking about. And that's what they're saying. Formula One themselves are saying that this is going to be an ongoing, it says final rules will be constantly evolved. And I think that these discussions are exactly what we need to do.
Yeah. So, hey, folks, we are streaming on YouTube, the Speed City channel. If you're around your PC and
Actually
check that out.
on Facebook and Twitter. Are we
Facebook. There you go.
Yeah, Facebook
on Facebook. Correct me there. Alrighty. So we're on Facebook. Feel free to post some comments. We'll include them in our conversations with you.
Yeah, and you can always tweet at us as well at Speedcaster. All right, let's go ahead and take our final break before the race. And we are now 20 minutes before the start of the Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix. You listen to Speed City's coverage on SiriusXM. Back after these messages.
Hi, this is Gene Haas, and this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
I think we got the entire Haas team to give us a little bumper. That was Gene Haas bringing us back.
There you go. Hey, and join in with us, Facebook broadcasting right now. We'll include your comments in our discussions.
And give us a call if you'd like, 512-643-5483. I want to thank Paul Bryan. He just tweeted at us a few minutes ago. I think he was tweeting about our Honda comments. He says, was Honda racing F1 disappointed? Is it cultural? Hasagwa, was he despondent? He said, was he worried he'd take himself out? I think that, and he said, listening to my new pre-race addiction on Speedcaster on SiriusXM. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. And yeah, I that's what I was referring to exactly, is that it is a cultural thing, I think. And Jonathan has been over there many times, and I think that's why he was saying that. But yeah, let's see. We're now about 15 minutes from the race. I want to start talking about. Oh, you talked about Giovinazzi having a penalty, right?
Giovinazzi and Raikkonen were penalized, and I don't fully understand the penalty around it, except that they utilized some aid that wasn't allowed in managing their clutch for the start of the last race, German Grand Prix. And so if I understand, my impression or my interpretation is that they utilize some of the technology that's available to manage their clutch at the start instead of doing it themselves. And
what it did was I actually listened to a podcast somewhere. I don't remember where it was. May have been BBC, but talking about exactly what happened. You're talking about at the German Grand Prix, why they got penalized. Basically, it hit limited wheel spin. So in essence, it was traction control. And think about the traction control in the rain last week. Wouldn't that have been nice? But essentially, you're right. It was clutch activity, and it was limiting the wheel spin. and just like traction control. I don't think it was to the degree of traction control where they actually measure the wheel
Right.
speed and then adjust throttle or clutch or brake or whatever your car does. But in this case, it was just some limitation. But it was enough to where they penalized him pretty good, and it took those points away. So that was a big deal last week.
Probably in the sense of anti-stall mode or something.
Yeah, probably so. But again, another thing that added to what was the German Grand Prix, which was just fantastic. I mean, really. I mean, I know that, but again, that's just another little part of it. So, all right, Les. So we are now a few minutes away from the Hungarian Grand Prix. Let's talk about that race itself, because number one, they talk about how it is not a place that you're going to see a lot of passing typically. And so what about the start of the race?
Start of the race, a long run to the first. And so I think because of, and apparently that's a pretty accurate description, I think what we're going to see is a gangbuster with everybody trying to get out front, elbows out, everybody elbowing each other to get to the front. This is one of those where I believe the shenanigans to turn one are going to be a higher impact on this race than anything else than we've seen in a while. This is really an important one. I'm not sure what it's going to do for it later on around that, how it's going to play out the rest of the race day. But absolutely, without a doubt, that long run of T1 is crucial, extra crucial in this situation.
Yep, extra crucial. And for Max Verstappen, who we mentioned it earlier in the show, but he needs a good start. He does not need to do what he's done in a couple of the last three races, and that is have a poor start. Because, man, wouldn't that just suck if Verstappen had a bad start and Bottas maybe didn't have the greatest start, and Hamilton got ahead of both of them and won the race, went out ahead and never looked back. That's what I don't want to see happen at the beginning of this race. And I want to see Verstappen I don't want him to lose the race that way. If he's going to lose the race in a different way with good racing and battles, I'm fine with that. But I don't want to see it happen that way. I'm fine with Verstappen winning this race. I'm with him going pole to pole. I would not complain about that at all. I would love to see some battle back there with Leclerc and Hamilton. You've got that possibility going on. I mean, you never know at the beginning of this race. So it's Formula One. So yeah. What else do we want to look for in the beginning? Not just the beginning of this race, but are we going to have a three-way fight for the victory? Is it going to be Red Bull and Mercedes and Ferrari, or is Ferrari just not going to show up? I don't know.
I think this is a great opportunity. Again, Charles is ahead of Seb, but let's see if they will actually work together, defend from the back, keep anybody else from coming up ahead of them, because Lando Norris is in that Renault, and he is looking really good. He is, we know he's awesome, but I think he's got to be kept away from that front end. I'm not sure Pierre Gasly's going to do that, but Lando Norris, watch him on the charge.
Gasly needs to he needs to step up, and I don't know what that looks like there, but he needs to step up for sure. All right, so thinking about some other things that, once we get to the middle of the grid, the first
anything goes is the way I feel.
It does. And that's what I was about to say, is that we're talking, thousandths and hundredths of a second all throughout, anywhere from about 12th to 7th. Everything in there is hundredths, thousandths of a second. And so today, let me just run through 7th to 12th right now. So Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, and then Roman Grosjean, Kimi Räikkönen, Hülkenberg, Alex Albon, and then Kvyat and Magnussen in 13 and 14. And you could take any of those numbers, any of those drivers, and roll the dice, and that order could change pretty dramatically. I think maybe Kvyat and Magnussen, I shouldn't say that I'm not going to be out there, but I think Magnussen, depending on what happens.
Which Magnussen shows up?
Well, I'm not so, I feel like it's the car. That's what I feel like, is that the car is too it's either got that little tight window that he talked about, the tight window of performance,
Right.
where if you get outside of that, or whether it's just an inconsistent car. I don't blame it as much on Magnussen because he's proven a lot of times he's done well. So, what about, you know what? Let's take one small diversion. We talked about Gasly. Is Gasly on the chopping block? So we talked about Grosjean, and then the last week he scored points, and then looking good this weekend. What about Grosjean for next year?
Honestly, let me start off by saying that I don't think last weekend is an indicator of really anybody's true performance.
Yep, I can't argue with that.
And so, great. Of course, I want points for Haas. You got to have them. But I don't think that's a big deal. Grosjean, in general, I think loyalty is running thin, and I think he should be feeling threatened at this point. Gunther says he doesn't, they came to us early, all that kind of thing. Well, dude, that's only going to last so long. Do I think names such as Santino Ferrucci are part of it? I don't think Santino's up there yet, based on his IndyCar performance. I think, he's been.
What do you
in
mean? Because he's done well in IndyCar?
He's done okay.
Because I think he's done better than okay in IndyCar for a rookie. Because he's done really well in the obvious thing that comes to mind is what he did, how he lost his cool in Formula 2, and
right.
Texting or something on his cell phone besides,
Well, and a little bit about that story. It was in his driving suit, and he forgot to take it out. When he got in the car, he took off, ran the, I can't remember, I think it was a practice session possibly. But anyway, so he ran that. Well, through all the motions of the practice session, his phone came out of his pocket and was in the floorboard. And he picked it up, and whether he actually texted or anything with it, he was either on pit lane or coming back through the paddock or something, getting towed in, and he was seen with the phone in his hand while he was in the car, which is an absolute no-no. It was an accident. Yeah, he might have got away with it. He just picked up the phone and shoved it under himself and sat on it for the remainder of the tow in. And bottom line, that was wrong.
Well, but also during that same interaction, I think he may have rammed the other car, or he did something way beyond just having the cell. Anyway, we're definitely a little bit off track, because the bottom line is that you agree that I think that Grosjean is in trouble.
Yes,
and there's been lots of names thrown out there, but I think last year we said it before the season. We said we thought that they did the right choice by bringing them both back. I don't know. I think I would have to agree with most of the interwebs in that Grosjean probably is in trouble. So I will concede that. But all right, Les, we're down to just a couple of minutes here, so let's start talking about our predictions for the race.
Simon Pagenaud in the garage.
I saw that. I saw Simon tweeted out that he was going to the Grand Prix in Hungary, in Budapest. I actually reached out to the IndyCar PR people and said, hey, if he's there, tell him to call in. So maybe we'll get him to call in on the post-race show. And by the way, if you want to do that too, write this number down, 512-643-5483. Call us here in Austin, Texas. Coolest city in the United States, home of the United States Grand Prix. And by the way, speaking of the United States Grand Prix, if you're going to call in during the post-race show, we'll probably give away a pair of tickets to see the race here in Austin.
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Nothing else. It's it's going to be a great race this year. I'm excited. There's been some asphalt grooming out there as well. It's looking awesome.
And we got Pink and Imagine Dragons are the two concerts, Friday night and Saturday night. So.
There you go. And you know who else is coming?
Who's that?
Price Cobb coming to the post-race show.
That's right. That's right. Le Mans winner, Austinite, Price Cobb is going to join us for the post-race show. We're going to get some driver perspective, and hopefully he'll have a lot to say about Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly and all the gang and see. But all right, Les, let's talk about your predictions.
Prediction, I would love to see Ferrari up there. I'm going to go with Max getting in a tangle with one of the Mercedes guys. Don't know who.
Oh.
And it coming down to Bottas, Leclerc, and Seb.
I like that. That's not a bad call. Are you thinking turn one?
I think turn one.
Okay. Okay, so is that your heart or your head prediction? That sounds like your head prediction.
My head prediction is, can I hold off on making my prediction after turn one?
Okay, I'm going to go with the obvious one. I'm going to just say that Verstappen manages turn one and manages a good start, manages turn one and wins the race, start to finish. And my head would love to say, my heart would love to say that Leclerc somehow battles his way up to battle with Verstappen and for Leclerc to take his first win. I won't be disappointed if Max wins, but I'd love to see that. I think I'd love to see Leclerc start, because what that would mean is that maybe this chatter of having the Leclerc Verstappen for the next decade, maybe they have this one be the one
new rivalry.
Yeah, look, they did it back in Austria, but I would still like to. I'd still like to see that today. That would be my heart prediction for that.
All righty, good deal. Heart, Lando Norris coming up on the podium. I'd like to see that happen.
That would be cool too. That would be cool. Another one that I'd really like to see is George Russell and the Williams start to, they're competitive and start to be even a little more competitive. You gotta feel for the.
Gosh, I just like to see almost anybody behind Williams for Williams' sake.
yeah, it's true. And Kubica, that's we really haven't gotten to talk about it because he hadn't had a great car. But let's see how long we've got.
Well, one of the things we haven't spoken, Giovinazzi was penalized 3 places for impeding with some of the other drivers during qualifying, and so he's paying the price. That's why he's back there in 17 right now.
All right, I'm going to give everybody an assignment. If anybody's like us, are they nerdy enough to take notes during the race? If anybody does that, I want you to tweet them at us. I know that's really crazy. Probably most people don't do that, but I love it. I love to do it and compare at the end of the race. But all right, we're now about 30 seconds out. Make sure you write down the phone number 512-643-5483. Call us after the race, and we'll have a full 1 hour post-race show back after the race. Thanks for tuning in.